For over a decade, I had an office in Budapest, so I was there often. And whenever I stayed, I'd be in my apartment at the Danube. I'm an early riser, always have been. And every morning, after breakfast, I'd go for a short walk. Always the same route. Always the same destination. The Széchenyi Chain Bridge. A magnificent bridge stretching over the wide, swirling Danube, with a view of the majestic Buda Castle rising through the morning mist. It's breathtaking. Especially just after sunrise, when the light is soft and the water still seems to be half asleep. But that's not why I walk there. Not just for the view. I went there because of a ritual. On that bridge, the walking path is covered with these tiny little stones, and every time I reached the middle, I'd pick one up, a pebble no one else would notice, and throw it into the Danube. Why? Because with that one small action, I just altered the entire flow of rivers and oceans around the world, without anyone noticing. That's what it reminds me of. Even now, when I return to Budapest, I still do it. Because no situation is ever truly hopeless. No action is ever without effect. And when you want to change direction, when you feel stuck, you don't start by flipping the world upside down. You ask yourself one question: what is the smallest thing I can do that moves me towards something better? Even if it's invisible to others, even if no one claps, even if the result doesn't show up for a while. Because every movement shapes the current, and every current shapes the future. And maybe you're wondering, what if that tiny action, that one small thing I do, actually makes the future worse? I mean, how can I know that throwing a pebble into a calm river doesn't somehow create a ripple that turns into a wave and eventually a storm? The truth? I don't know. Though to be fair, I find it hard to believe that my little stone is the one that tips the balance of the oceans. But that's not the point. This ritual, it's not about control. It's about movement. It reminds me that I can always do something. Even the smallest thing, maybe even smaller than tossing a pebble into a sleepy river. Because no situation is ever truly hopeless, except maybe when you've been told there's nothing left to do, that your time is running out. That's the human condition. We all face that one day. But until then, there's always something you can do. Always. Something tiny. Something simple. Like 1 less cigarette today. 10 more steps than yesterday. 1 honest call to a friend you haven't spoken to in a while. Not dramatic. Not life-changing on its own. Just something. Small. Real. Yours. And no, you don't need to know where it will lead. That's not your job. Your job is to move something. Even just a little. Because movement creates energy. And energy creates change. And change, even the tiniest kind, has a way of finding its way forward. Sometimes without you even noticing. You might wonder, how can something so small actually help? How can throwing a pebble into a river, or taking one small step, or making one tiny decision, really make a difference in your mind, in your emotions, in your life? Well, here's what most people don't realize. The mind doesn't measure impact the way we think it does. It measures movement. Psychologically, when we feel stuck, truly stuck, it's rarely the size of the problem that breaks us. It's the belief that nothing we do will make a difference. That's what creates hopelessness. That's where fear feeds. That's when people shut down. But the moment, and I mean the moment, you take one action, no matter how small, you prove that belief wrong. Your nervous system feels it. Your brain registers it. Your identity shifts from I'm stuck to I'm moving. And that shift, that's where hope is born. In psychology, This is called self-efficacy. It's the belief that what you do makes a difference. It's one of the strongest predictors of resilience. And the only way to build it is by doing something, even the smallest something. Throw a stone, make the call, change one thing today. Because when you act, even if you're scared, even if you don't know the outcome, you're telling your mind, I'm not powerless. And that's where everything changes. So no, you don't have to find the biggest thing to fix. You don't need to reinvent your life overnight. You don't need to win the war by tomorrow. Start with the smallest thing, the easiest, the one thing you can do without force, without drama, without fear. Because that's where change begins. Not in grand gestures, but in quiet choices. One small thing today and again tomorrow. Not because it solves everything, but because it reminds you you're not stuck. You're not helpless. You're not too late. You're already moving just by choosing to begin. But maybe you don't believe me. Maybe it still feels too small to matter. So let me give you an example. In a small bookshop in London, a girl scribbled a note on a yellow post-it. If you're having a bad day, read page 132 of this one. She stuck it on a book and walked away. That's it. No name, no hashtag, no grand gesture, just a quiet act of kindness. A few days later, someone found it, read the page, and shared it on social media with the words, "That little note saved me today." The post went viral, the book was republished, and the publisher launched an anonymous kindness campaign, placing post-its in bookshops all across the country. One note, one page, one gesture. No one could have predicted it, and yet it moved something in someone, and from there, it moved the world. So now I'll ask you, gently, with no pressure, no expectations, what will be your one small thing? What's the tiniest action you could take today for yourself or someone else that doesn't solve everything, but moves something? Because maybe that's all it takes. A whisper instead of a shout, a pebble instead of a storm, a beginning instead of silence.